A 12-year-old shoots and kills a Sonic employee and is now charged with murder. We break down the complexities of this case with Texas attorney Katherine Lizardo. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Let's go to Kenne, Texas, where 32-year-old Matthew Davis, an employee at a Sonic drive-in, was shot and killed. And as sad as it is to think about this young father being gunned down, it's the suspects that may shock you. A 20-year-old and, get this, a 12-year-old were each facing murder charges. Now, the charge against the older of the two was dropped, but the juvenile is still facing that murder charge. Reporting indicates that the 20-year-old, identified as Angel Gomez, was being disorderly and allegedly urinated in the restaurant parking lot. When Davis tried to confront and engage with Gomez, the 12-year-old, who has not been identified, was in Gomez's car and allegedly took out an assault rifle and shot Davis, fired 6 shots. The 12-year-old fled the scene but was found and arrested. Gomez also fled but actually came back to the crime scene where he was apprehended. So many different aspects of the story I want to get into. So let me bring in right now Texas attorney Katherine Lizardo. Katherine, it's great to have you here. First, let me just tell everybody, this happened, 30, 40 minutes away from you, right?
Yes, it is. I am in Plano, Texas, very close to Keene. It's very tragic, and considering that we meaning Texans, have recently just been involved in that mass shooting in Allen, at the Allen Mall, which is about a few minutes away from me too.
So you know where I'm going to go with this. A minor, 12 years old. What goes into prosecuting a minor in Texas? Because I know that it can be quite challenging and also kind of complicated whether or not the minor or the juvenile should be prosecuted as an adult. What goes through this?
Definitely. It's very sad and tragic what is going on right now and what we just heard with a 12-year-old. A 12-year-old in Texas is considered a juvenile. That's a legal term in our court system because a juvenile can be between 10 years old up to 17 years old. And as a juvenile, that juvenile will go through the Texas Juvenile Justice Department. That's the TJJD justice system here in Texas. Depending if the county will request a certification for the juvenile to be tried as an adult, that's the only way that the juvenile, or one of the ways the juvenile will be tried as an adult in the adult criminal justice system. But that is highly unlikely here. Most likely, this 12-year-old juvenile will be adjudicated in the TJJD.
What makes you say that? Because murder is one of those charges where we've seen juveniles being tried as adults.
Yes. Well, murder is, as you know, a capital offense, felony offense in our country. And so here, even murder committed by a juvenile can be tried at TJJD. What the program actually tries to encourage is the rehabilitation and treatment of a juvenile, as opposed to the detention and public safety in the adult criminal justice system. So even though they're juvenile and have committed a capital offense, they are still tried through the TJJD program.
What's the maximum punishment? I would imagine it would be life in prison, but with the possibility of parole?
Well, it's different also when a juvenile is involved in the TJJD program, and that juvenile can be adjudicated with a sentence of indeterminate sentence. That's what they call it, that, which is that it could be up to 40 years in the juvenile facility. And if that juvenile is deemed to have committed that criminal offense of murder, he or she has up to 40 years in the juvenile detention facilities, but he could be transferred to adult prison at the age of 16. That's the hard part about that.
I want to talk about Gomez for a second. Why was Gomez charged with murder if he's not the one who opened fire?
Well, we have very limited information right now as to Gomez's involvement, other than the altercation, the physical altercation that led to the actual shooting. I would anticipate or suspect that he's the owner of the gun, the AR-15, and also that he fled the scene with the juvenile. He did return to the scene afterwards. That's where he was arrested, but he fled the scene, and firearm was in his vehicle. Now, I have to say, though, to comment that there were other occupants in the car. It's not just the shooter, it's not just the juvenile and Angel, the one who was part of the altercation. There were other occupants there. So we wonder what was happening with those occupants as well.
I was going to ask you that. It seems to me witness testimony, the people who were around there, and also the surveillance footage. If this is a Sonic, I imagine they have surveillance footage for the parking lot. That's going to play a critical role in determining what actually happened, right?
Definitely. I anticipate they've tried to get those videos. So the evidence we're looking at here are those surveillance videos and videos of any of the homes surrounding that area that might have had camera pointing to the street cameras, and also eyewitnesses, the employees at that Sonic, and those occupants themselves in the vehicle.
And the reason I point that out is because this case, is it possible that it's not as straightforward as it may seem at the beginning? In the sense that if there was a physical altercation between the victim and Gomez, if that we saw that, is there any way that there could be a defense here? Is there any way the 12-year-old could mount a defense of others, that perhaps the 12-year-old thought that Gomez's life was in danger and felt the need to open fire? There is no indication at this point. I want to make this very, very clear. There is no evidence at this point that Mr. Davis had a weapon on him, or let alone a gun. So it would be very hard to justify the use of an AR-15 assault rifle. But can you think of any defense here that may make sense?
We have such limited information, and like you mentioned, that's the instinctive response of people as to why would a 12-year-old actually pull a gun, an AR-15, to shoot the victim. And like you mentioned, we have no facts as to if there's any other weapon involved here between the victim and Mr. Gomez. And so that defense of possibly thinking that the juvenile was trying to protect or help Gomez during the altercation might be a possible defense.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Texas a stand your ground state, where you don't have a duty to retreat? You can use deadly force if you feel your life was threatened or someone else's life was threatened. Can a juvenile use a stand your ground defense? I can't believe I'm saying it, but that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, well, yes, Texas does have that law, and I'm curious. I haven't personally seen or heard that was used for a juvenile as a defense. And here, they were in a public area at Sonic, but because if I don't know actually the relationship of the juvenile to Gomez,
Correct,
if they're related or they're friends or their family. So I don't know the extent of how stand your ground would apply to Gomez and the juvenile.
What about the number of shots? The way I think about it, we've covered a number of self-defense cases before, right? And if someone fires multiple rounds, that could be considered excessive, and you didn't need to do that in your life, maybe, and that excessive force shows that it went beyond the limits of self-defense. But here, when you're dealing with a juvenile, you might say this is somebody who panicked and opened fire, fired 6 shots. They were scared. And it's not so simple to say the number of shots or maybe even fleeing the scene is evidence of guilt. What do you think about that?
Yes, all of those must be considered with the adjudication of this juvenile, because the weapon used was AR-15. And we've had a lot of discussion and a lot of high-profile trials that we've covered with AR-15, and we know how high-powered that is, and how much bullets that can just, inflict on any victim. You don't have to be a gun expert to know that. So having 6 bullets fired from an AR-15 is not uncommon, sadly, because of the way that firearm is built.
Yeah, it's a very high-powered weapon. And look, at this point, based on the limited facts we see, I think it's going to be very hard to defend against this. It seems that Mr. Davis was just doing his job, trying to subdue what was maybe an erratic situation, and was trying to do his job. We are going to learn more details about this interaction, which I think will play key. As we discussed, the surveillance is going to play an important role. The witnesses will play an important role. Sonic did release a statement. They said, "We were saddened to learn about the tragedy involving a franchise team member in Keene, Texas. The franchisee is cooperating fully with local authorities as they conduct their investigation." And you mentioned, or I want to mention again, this GoFundMe that has been started to help Mr. Davis's family cover the funeral costs and support his 10-year-old son. It's currently at almost $25,000 at the time of this recording. We're going to put it up there for all of you to see. It's .gofundme.com, and you'll see the different URL code right there if you want to donate. Katherine Lizardo, thank you for taking the time. A really difficult case, and I appreciate you giving your perspective.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.